I'm going to indulge me a little bit. I'm going to start off this morning by talking a little bit about some stuff that's going on in our culture. There's a lot of stuff going on, huh?
Yeah.
Lots. It's just lots. And we're living in a world today where people tend to ignore this thing that we used to have called facts. Have you noticed that? It happens a lot in our culture, and someone is convinced in their own mind about something, right? You're probably married to somebody like this. I know my wife is. But they're presented with facts that don't align with their predisposed ideas, right? And rather than analyzing and seeking to understand how these new facts should maybe, inform their perspective and their point of view, what do people do? They defiantly disregard the information and they call it stupid, right? Or they discredit the source. What's it called? Fake news, right? I mean, all my life I've never heard the word fake so much. Okay, then these last few years, and they displace, these facts that they're presented with something now we call alternative truths. Okay. And there's a whole lesson there of philosophy of how you can't have alternative truths. It's either truth or it's false. That's just the way it works. But I think this is part of the reason why this is going on. An individual associates with a particular group of people, okay, and that holds to certain principles and ideologies, okay, certain ideas, and it could be a religious group, right? It could be a political party, okay? It could be a social cause, whatever, okay? But there's an identity that gets found by identifying with this certain cause, this certain party, this certain group, right? And they gain a certain identity based on the idea of being a non-believer, being a Jew or a Muslim or various shades of Christian, right? Whether it be Catholic, Baptist, Southern Baptist, Fundamentalist Baptist, and whatever. Or they could be a Democrat or a Republican or a libertarian, and so they self-identify as a conservative or a progressive or a Trump guy or a Biden guy, or they walk around with a "Don't Tread on Me" flag, on their T-shirt or something like that, or they could be an environmentalist, a community activist, okay, pro-choice, pro-life, against gun control, for gun control. There's all these things. There's all this milieu, and for whatever it is, for a lot of people, this becomes an identity. This defines kind of like who I am, okay, this cause, this issue, this principle, okay, defines who I am, and for many it becomes like the most important part of their life. Is that true? Am I wrong? Are we okay? And there's something that's going on there. They're connecting their lives to something that's bigger than themselves, right? And it gives their life a sense of order. Okay, they get a sense of purpose from that, and they're a part of a group. Okay, there's an identity that gets established by that, and that can be good in many ways. It really can be. To be a part of something bigger than yourself, to have a sense of purpose in life, and all that. Those are good things. But also in the world we're living in today, by its very nature, okay, what it does is it creates an in-group, a group that I'm a part of, and then what else does it create? An out-group. Okay, a group that's out there that's not one of us, right? And so it creates this us and them mentality, and by its very nature, it creates enemies, right? You have enemies now, and so while the different identities create communities of like-minded people, okay, it also tends to create divisions in the world that we're living in. And those divisions get way more complex and way more complicated when hybrid groups are formed, okay? Because we tend to get hybrid groups going out of this now. And so we have Christian nationalists who identify as Christians, and they become, this ideology becomes one, okay? And then you've got pro-life Second Amendment Southern Baptists, right? Second Amendment means, don't take my guns away, right? Then you got progressive, pro-choice Methodists, okay? And then you got independent, fundamental, King James only, Bible-believing Baptists, right? And so on, okay? And so you get all these groups and all these disagreements that they represent and divisions, which can lead to disrespect, leads to hatreds, and it leads to fights by its very nature, okay? And we end up not being able to see a different point of view. We talk past each other. We don't talk to each other anymore. And instead of listening to each other, we just say, "Oh, you're one of them." Throw the label on them and walk away, feeling good about yourself and feeling bad about them, okay? And why do we do this? Well, we do it because we're only interested in information that confirms what we already believe. I really think that's part of it, okay? And we find this social cohesion through our identity group, whatever our group is, okay? And that becomes more important to us than listening to or accepting information that's inconsistent with our group's thinking, our dogma, okay? And we're not willing to accept sometimes, think about this, the social consequences of entertaining a different idea, because then people in our group might look down upon us for even talking to those people and entertaining those other ideas, okay? And because the in-group demands, doctrinal purity, right? Everything has to be consistent. It just has to be that way. So we block out information that we disagree with by, how do we do it? Through our social media friends, right? And through the biased news feeds that we listen to, whatever it is, okay? And only keeping friendships with people who agree with us. I've lost a whole bunch of 20-year friendships over the last 3 years for saying stuff like this, okay? So we have this tendency to just search for information that confirms what we already believe. Now, here's the thing. Jesus showed up in a world that was very much like this. Believe it or not. They didn't have social media, so it was harder to find each other, maybe. Okay? But there was these different factions that had different identities in the world that when he walked the planet, this is what was going on in the culture. You had Pharisees. Pharisees were the conservative, religious, cultural warriors. That's who they were. They were trying to reestablish something, make it great again, type of thing. And they were generally respected by the people, okay? Jesus didn't get along with them very well, not all of them at least. And then there was these Essenes. This was the group, they were devout. They were separatistic, okay? They see what's going on in a place like Valley Center and they go, I am so out of here. I'm moving to Ranchita. Okay, there's just too many people. Do you see what's going on? And they were devout and they looked at all the stuff, the divisions that were going on in their world politically and all this kind of stuff. And they said, I just don't want nothing to do with it. And so they pulled away. Then you had Sadducees, okay, which are religious liberals. The way you remember Sadducees is they're sad, you see, because they think all there is what you get out of this life, okay? There was no afterlife, no reward, there's no heaven, none of that. Okay? But these people were low on convictions, okay? They had this veneer of religion on them, but they were really high on power and prestige. That's what they were about, okay? And then you had Herodians. These were the political operatives. They were identified with King Herod of the Romans. And then you had Zealots. They were kind of God and country people, but they were mostly country people, okay? They were nationalists, and they wanted to overthrow the Romans and stuff. And these influences, these identities, okay, Jesus had some of these guys from these different groups in his inner circle. Did you know that? In his inner circle, the 12, okay? You know, everybody was influenced by the Pharisees, okay, because they just had certain ideas. People respected them. They were very serious about their faith and their country and stuff like that. And they were generally respected. Everybody was in some way influenced by them. And they were respected by most Jews who took their faith seriously. And then the Essenes, these devout separatists, the ones that moved to Ranchita or Idaho or wherever, okay. Now here's the thing, Andrew and Peter, you've heard of Andrew and Peter. Peter, you know, they were brothers. And before they followed Jesus, they actually followed this guy named John the Baptist. And John the Baptist was likely a part of this Essene group. He moved out to the desert, got away from the people, and people came to him to be baptized by him and to hear from him. And so Andrew and Peter were a part of this. They started out as John's followers. And then you had Herodians, okay, in the form of Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector for the Romans, okay? So you're mixing a tax collector for the Romans who was viewed as a traitor and just an opportunistic guy who wanted to make money by given the situation, didn't care about the principles associated that he was violating in their culture and stuff. And then you mix in Andrew and Peter who didn't want anything to do with any of that stuff, right? And then you've got a zealot in the group. Okay, you've got this guy named Simon, and he's like you know, going to the pubs at night talking treason, cleaning his AR. You know, we're gonna take the place over. We're gonna get rid of these Romans and all this kind of stuff. And so it's interesting group dynamics if you think about it when they're traveling and stuff like that, when they're talking and whatnot. You've got devout, otherworldly Essene types, okay, and then mixed in with this worldly Roman tax collector, Herodian types, okay? And then you've got God and country, Pharisee, zealot types. And Jesus says, I'm going to put them all together and see what happens, okay? You know, and so he intentionally, and we don't know a lot about a lot of the other disciples and stuff, but Jesus intentionally created a group of diverse people, okay, from these different elements of society. And put in modern terms, okay, if Jesus was forming a group of followers today, which by the way he is, okay, he would no doubt mix together devout separatist types who dig a moat of protection around their families by maybe limiting smartphone use with the kids, okay? Keeping a tight rein on media exposure, okay? Maybe homeschooling, right? And staying out of the political, cultural war that's going on, okay? So you have those types. And then he'd throw in some progressive liberal Democrats, you know, who are sympathetic towards these modern cultural shifts that are going on in our world, and the attitudes about maybe redistribution of wealth, you know, and expansion of government programs and influence. Let's throw a couple of them in the room. And then he'd throw in some red-hatted, you know, conservative Republican types, okay, who shake angry fists at cultural change and believe there are sinister, some believe secret forces undermining our way of life. They have a don't tread on me but treat me special kind of attitude towards an ever-shrinking government that they hope for. And now in the first century, these groups didn't naturally get along, okay? These devout, otherworldly Essene types mixed in with the Roman tax collector Herodian types, mixed in with the God and country Pharisee zealot types, okay? They didn't naturally get along, okay? And in the 21st century, do these groups get along? Do they? At all?
Sometimes.
Well, some maybe, you know, but generally not. As a matter of fact, people from these different kinds of groups, if you think of just churches, what do? They tend to self-segregate, right? They go to places where they're hearing what they want to hear, okay? Maybe rather than what they need to hear, okay? But from the beginning, Jesus' plan was to unite these disparate groups, okay? And unite them around his values and around his plan for the betterment of the world. And he had a really hard time doing it, just like it's a hard thing to do today, okay? And he was trying to get them to redefine themselves and to grab onto a new identity, a different identity, okay, than the ones that were just common out there in the world, and to give them a new way of seeing. He was trying to get them to listen to what he was saying. We've been in the middle chapters of Mark's account of Jesus' life, and we see this repeatedly throughout the middle chapters of Mark's account of Jesus' life. The disciples were having a hard time reprogramming their minds. They were thinking in normal categories, and Jesus was trying to get them to think in a different way. And they wanted to leverage the movement that Jesus was bringing. They wanted to leverage it into a visible political movement that would transform their nation into greatness. That's what was going on. And that's what they wanted, okay? And Jesus kept telling them that the message was different than that, and they weren't getting it. So let me just kind of review what we've seen. You know, he said, don't mix, he called it yeast. Don't mix the yeast of politicians and the yeast of cultural warriors. He said, don't mix the yeast of the Pharisees and the Herodians into the bread that I'm making. Don't put it in the recipe. When you put yeast into dough, what does it do to the dough? It changes the whole composition of it, right? It's just completely different. It goes from being a nice tortilla, right, to being Wonder Bread or something, you know. And Jesus is saying, what I'm doing doesn't involve being absorbed in a political or cultural idea. That's not what I'm doing, okay? And then he said, he kept saying, the path to greatness, okay, involves service to others and personal sacrifice, not demanding your own way. That's what it involves. And they're like, what do you mean? Okay? And then he kept saying, I'm not doing this just for certain people, for some people. This is for everybody. And he reflected that in some of the composition of the group that he brought together, right? And these guys are completely slow on the uptake. They're not getting it. They're not seeing it. They're not hearing him. They're holding on to their ideas. They don't want to relinquish their former identities. They're simply confused. They're just not getting it. But here's what's going on with the time now. Time is starting to run short. Jesus knows that he's going to depart the scene. He keeps repeating it. He keeps saying, I'm going to get killed. Okay? But don't worry, then 3 days later I'm going to rise from the dead. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. But he needed to get them properly trained and ready, because he was going to leave this movement that he was starting to these knuckleheads who weren't getting it. They weren't getting it. And so God intervened in a dramatic way. We saw this, you know. Jesus took Peter, James, and John. This is a supernatural experience. They went all alone up into this high mountain, and it says that he was transformed before them. All of a sudden, he's like glowy white. And they're like, what is going on? Okay, and then his clothes became dazzling white, and then he's sitting there chatting it up with the greatest prophet that ever lived, Elijah, and the great lawgiver, Moses. The three of them were all glowy, and they're just sitting there talking to each other. And they're just like, they don't know what to do, okay? And Peter, you know, he was one of those guys, you probably have a friend like this, you know, when they don't know what to do or what to say, they say stuff anyway. And this is exactly what he did, okay? It says that because he didn't know what to say because he was so afraid, he goes, Jesus, I got an idea. It's good for us to be here. We'll make 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. How about that? And you guys can like hang up hammocks or something like that and hang out. Because he didn't know what to say. That's what the text says. And then this cloud envelops the whole scene. And God himself, the Father, speaks. And he says, this is my Son, whom I love, Listen to him. Would you guys listen to him? You're not listening to him. So after, God shows up with Moses and Elijah and says, this is my son. Listen to him. You'd think they'd start listening to him, right? Wouldn't you? I mean, that's pretty dramatic, but that's not what happened, okay? They still thought the movement was going to involve position and power, okay? And even in their little group, we're going to see that they were competing for position and power. They wanted to be treated in a certain way by Jesus, and they were competing for it, okay? And here's how we know. Like in Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 30, it says that they left that place and passed through Galilee, and Jesus didn't want anyone to know where they were because he needed to have some training time with these guys. He needed to teach them alone. And he said to them again, hey, he used the term the Son of Man because he didn't like the baggage that came in with the term Messiah, okay, the way the culture defined it. So he's basically saying, hey, I'm going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill me, and after 3 days, I will rise. Then it says they didn't understand what he meant, and they didn't want to ask him about it because they didn't want to appear stupid, I think. And so they just were afraid to ask him, so they didn't ask for clarification. And boy, was it true that they weren't hearing him. And here's how we know. It says, then they came to the town of Capernaum, which was kind of like home base, okay? They went into the house. We can assume that's Peter's house because that was kind of home base. And he asked them, hey guys, when we were walking here on the road, I saw you arguing. What were you guys arguing about? And they're like, they wouldn't say. They kept quiet. You know why? Because they're having an argument about who was the greatest. Man, I'm greater than you. I'm way better than you. He likes me more than he likes you. Right? They're arguing about that, okay, on the way. And he says, guys, time for a team meeting. Sit down. He got them together. He said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last, and the one who serves everybody. That's what greatness looks like in the real world, okay? Then he illustrates his point. We looked at this last week. He took a little child who was in the house, and the 12 of them were sitting there, and he takes this child and he puts the child right in the midst of the 12. Now there's 13 of them sitting there with a little kid sitting there. And he said to them, whoever welcomes these little children in my name, okay, doesn't really welcome them, they welcomes me, okay? But whoever does not welcome them does not welcome, and whoever does not welcome me does not welcome the one who sent me into this world. He's asking them to accept his instructions like a little child would. He said, would you just please forget everything you learned, okay? Would you let go of it, and would you learn how to do the right thing? Here's the right thing to do. And what do we expect a little child to say when we say, Johnny, would you do this? Yes, Daddy. Yes, Daddy. And then to do it at the right time. We want our kids to do that when? Oh, okay, I'll do it now. I'll do it now. And we want them to do it in the right way. And lots of times they don't know how, right? And so what do we say? The kid will say, can you show me? Can you show me how to do this? And we show them how, and then we want them to do it for the right reason. It'd be, how did I do? Did I do a good job? And like today, back then there were many voices who were looking to this power and position idea of change, okay, in the world. And instead of a childlike simplicity, okay, of sacrifice and service to other people, okay? And so after directly confronting those in his inner circle, he says, guys, don't argue about who's the greatest anymore, okay? That's not how this works, okay? Be like children now let's learn how to do this. I want to teach you how to do this and stuff. You would think that they'd knock it off, right?
Yeah.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened. Then you come to Mark chapter 10, and they're still not listening to him. After God showed up in a cloud and said, "Listen to him," still not listening. It says this, the next manifestation of this. James and John, they were brothers, the sons of Zebedee, sons of thunder, what their name means. Okay, and they came over to Jesus, and they said, "Teacher, we want you to do us a favor." Okay, what do you want? When you sit on your glorious throne, okay, we want to have the places of honor next to you. We want to have one of us sit on your left and one of us sit on your right. Mom and Dad would be so proud. You know, and you know, it's not only that. We're going to learn that they thought they were worthy of it, because they're the greatest. Okay, and Jesus said to him, "You don't know what you're asking, guys. You have no idea." And he says this, speaking of his suffering that was coming. He said, "Are you able to drink the bitter cup of suffering that I am about to drink? And will you be able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering that I'm going to be baptized with?" Think about that idea of a cup that you drink, suffering that is ingested. It's so complete. It's inside of you. Internal suffering. And then a baptism which you're dipped in. A baptism of suffering that's external. Just complete, inside, outside suffering. Are you able to do that? Oh yeah. We can do that. It's the way they replied. We're able. And Jesus said, you know, you're going to suffer. You have no idea what's coming. Okay? But I have no right to say who's going to sit on my right or my left, for God himself has prepared those places for whoever he's chosen. And then, well, these two went over, and the 10 others were in the room, and they heard what was going on, and how do you think they reacted? It says that they became indignant with them. The 10 said, "How dare they?" Right? Oh, did you see what they just did? They went and asked for the right and the left-hand side. They want to sit in the glory. They want their mom and dad to be proud. You know, they think they're able. Who do they think they are? Right? What's implied by that? They're not that great. I mean, we're greater than that. Right? Especially me. Right? They're still competing. Okay? So Jesus has to have another team meeting. Okay? And he called them together. And he said, you know, think about the world we live in. He said the rulers of this world lord it over, okay, their people. They lord over people. And the officials flaunt their authority over the people that they rule. But among you, it will be different. It will be different. Okay? Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be a servant. And whichever of you wants to be first, the greatest, has to be the slave of all. Okay? For even I, Jesus said, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. It will be different among you. And so, let me just ask you, okay, if we strive to win the cultural and political war that's going on in our world, okay, if the church of Jesus Christ aligns itself in those battles, okay, how are we being different? Are we being different? You see, Jesus knew the only way to really make change, the only way to save the world, okay, was for his followers to follow his instructions like a child. To learn how to play a child's game, follow the leader. Right? Remember follow the leader? You guys played that lately? Why don't you guys all come over on Friday night? We'll throw some burgers on the grill, and we'll play a great game of follow the leader.
I'll be there.
We don't, yeah. And he said in chapter 9, after they argued about who is the greatest, he said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and servant of all. Okay? And when the two came, and the 10 got mad at him and stuff, and because they wanted positions of power and prestige and privilege, he said, hey, that's the way it works in the world, the rulers of this world, okay? And that's the system. That's how it works. But among you, it's got to be different, guys. It's got to be different. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Follow the leader. How does the game, it's a real basic game, right? How does follow the leader work? You do what the leader does, right? The leader starts walking around the room, right? You start walking around the room, right? Touches his nose, you touch the nose, right? Starts screaming at the top of his lungs, you scream at the top of your lungs. You do whatever the leader does in the way that the leader does it. And so in the first century, Jesus told his diverse team, okay, that was made up of this mix of people who didn't naturally get along, okay? He said, be different. Grab a hold of a new identity. All that other stuff, it's okay to be a part of a political party or whatever stuff, but make that secondary, tertiary. Make that not the main thing. Make the main thing the identity that you have in him. Make that the main thing. And as maybe you have influence and you lead within those realms, lead as a servant would lead. Practice what's called servant leadership. Work looking out for the well-being and the best interests of the people that you're leading, not lording it over them. Be different, okay? In the 21st century, Jesus is telling his church, the devout separatist types who want to move to Tennessee, Texas. I got friends all over the country that used to live here, right? And he wants the red-hatted conservative, Republican types to sit in the same room with the Democrat, progressive, liberal types. And some of you go, how could that be possible? Right? Be different. Be different. Let me briefly describe the servant-slave identity in a way that might make better sense, okay? I've climbed the 2 tallest mountains in Africa, okay, when I was a younger person, okay? I've climbed Mount Kenya, which is the 2nd tallest mountain in Africa, and I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And when we did it, we only carried day packs, okay? Why? Because we hired porters. As a matter of fact, by law, you had to hire porters because it created jobs in those communities that surrounded those mountains. And what was the job of a porter? To carry all your stuff. My group, we had too much stuff, so what do? I don't know, for like $30, we hired another porter. No big deal, right? And then we had guides to show us the way because we didn't know how to get up it on our own, okay? And now, most of the porters, okay, as a matter of fact, all of the porters, none of them went to the summit of the peak. Not one. You know why? Because that's not their job. Their job is to carry the tents and the food and all that stuff, right? And set it up for you. So you show up and you sit down and eat. It was awesome. And that's not their purpose. That's not their role, okay? The guides, they went to the summit with us. Why? Because that was their job, okay? And to get us to the top, okay? The idea becomes very simple. Porters and guides, okay, aren't there to get themselves to the top. Those guides didn't care that they had summited one more time because they'd done it a whole bunch of times, okay? They were just doing their job. What was the job of the porters and guides? Was it to get themselves to the top? No. What's their job? To get you to the top. To get you to the top. That was their job. That was success, okay? Jesus came into this world not to get to the top, okay? Not to get to the top. Instead, he sacrificed and gave himself to get others to the top. And what he's saying is, let's be different, church. You know, make it our job not to get ourselves to the top, not to get our way and all this kind of stuff, but hey, to reach out to other people and to get them to the top. What are we? We're the porters. We're the ones that will carry the burdens, okay? We're the guides. We're the ones, hey, this is the way. Let's go. I'm here to get you to the top. And the way we do this is we accept. We accept others. Why do we accept others? Because we've been accepted. You know, where somebody's starting point is, well, you had your starting point. And for a lot of you, you were pretty screwed up. I know I was. You know, we don't judge each other's starting points. We accept their starting points just like we were accepted. And we show compassion. Why? Because we've received compassion. Okay? And we find freedom in truth. Right? Because the truth has set us free. And let's help people discover truth. Okay? And go through that process of learning and finding that exposure. And all through this, what we do is we serve. Okay? Because values of acceptance, compassion, and truth are pretty much meaningless unless we put actions, back them up with actions, and carrying their burdens, being their guides, showing people the way. Let's pray together. Father, you taught us that greatness doesn't come through the projection of power, but through acts of service, where we place the needs of others above our own, where we live the higher values that you taught us about. That greatness is accomplishing the unrequired, doing what is right beyond what is expected. Lord, inspire us to go beyond what is expected. Make us people who are courageous in that. People who are willing to take extraordinary steps in service, graciousness, and love towards others, especially towards people who are different than us. Lord, use our strengths and weaknesses, use our thoughts and affections, use our skills and financial resources in service to you and all of those for whom you were nailed to that tree. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Hey, at Ridgeview Church, we're trying to learn how to live our one and only lives with passion for God and compassion for others. We hope you'll join us. If it's safe for you to come in person, we meet at our Lake Wolford Road campus in Valley Center, California at 9:30 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We'd love to see you. We just have the greatest time together. It's super fun. We have a great group of people. If it's not safe for you to do that quite yet, hey, continue to watch online, and we thank you for your financial support. You can see on the screen the different kinds of options you have to support our ministry financially. God bless you, and have a great week.